Hey, we should be recording.
All right. Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to my office. I am coming to you today live and in color from um, where I really work and live because I have a hearing right after that. That explains, of course, the bow tie and the other accoutrement, including the shameless wall of self-congratulation behind you, but don't let that influence or fool you in any way. What we're here to really talk about, what I enjoy talking about most is intellectual property. And today we're going to be picking up where we left off, and that has to do with the improbable story of the ubiquitous paper bag. I think you'll recall at our last lecture, we talked a lot about this thing here, which is the latest iteration of the invention of the paper bag, which was patented by Apple. And we talked about the various patented technology that goes into even a simple thing that allows you to carry your expensive Apple product home from the Apple store, which has a reminder of where you were, a reminder of how environmentally conscious the company is that you purchased your item from, which is important to the company's goodwill, which has specially designed handles so that your hands don't get fatigued from carrying their ultra-light, ultra-expensive electronics home. But as we discussed last time, there's a lot of technology that goes into that bag, and that brought up a particular inventor that I wanted to talk about, whose lifetime is really a analog for your lives as students. And that inventor that I wanted to talk about was Margaret Knight, who is the inventor of the ubiquitous, unassuming, ordinary paper bag. And this is an example of that ordinary paper bag made by the Eastern Bag Company. In many ways, as we'll discuss, this particular design is sort of a Rosetta Stone to the modern technological achievements that paper bags, an everyday item, represent. So who was Margaret Knight? Margaret Knight was born in York, Maine in 1883 and grew up in Manchester, New Hampshire, which you can almost see from my window here. And as a child, she liked to tinker with things, and she made toys for herself and her brothers. But when her father died when she was at the age of 12, she was forced to go to work in a cotton mill to help out the family. And one day, 12-year-old Margaret Knight is working in the cotton mill when she watches an accident occur where a snagged thread from the sweater that a coworker was wearing was snagged by the shuttle of a cotton mill. I don't know if you've ever seen a cotton mill. Believe it or not, I'm not old enough to remember them myself, but a cotton mill has a big armature on the top that goes back and forth as it weaves the cotton. And a thread from the coworker's sweater got caught on this mechanical arm, and it severely injured the worker. Margaret Knight, who was used to tinkering with things, but had no formal education, certainly at, I think she was 15 at the time, certainly no formal engineering education, went to work on creating a device that restrained the shuttles from falling out of the looms when they got caught on something, which caused actually the entire machine to shut off when something went wrong. Are any of you, can any of you name that invention or a modern application of that invention?
Kill switch.
Exactly, exactly. Margaret Knight's invention in 1860 of a device which turned off the cotton mill was an early iteration of the kill switch. Just like the paper bag that she invented in the 1860s is the early iteration of its grandchild, the Apple paper bag. But this remarkable woman, at the age of 15, think about it, invented the precursor to the kill switch. And by the way, what happened to that invention? Well, because she was 15 years old, and because I guess she was working for a cotton producer at the time, that invention that she came up with was scooped up by the cotton manufacturer and patented and sold. And they made more money off of that invention than they did selling cotton. A cautionary tale, one that is, I think, going to be repeated again and again and again through this course. Not unlike the student, Margaret Knight, was working, had an idea on her own time, but lost her invention because she wasn't able to, as a 15-year-old, she knew nothing about patenting anything like that. And someone else ended up profiting from her creative genius. Anyhow, a few years later, in 1868, Margaret went to work for the Columbia Paper Bag Company in Springfield, Massachusetts. And at that time, paper bags were created as flat containers. They actually looked like big envelopes. So they were, if you can picture it, sort of a two-dimensional product. Knight got the idea that it might make more sense to create a square bottom paper bag that would be more useful. And by square bottom, what I'm talking about is that, the square bottom bag. In 1868, the paper bag was flat like this. It didn't have this square bottom. And it was Margaret Knight who had the idea to essentially turn it into a three-dimensional item like this. And so she realized that this system would be, this design would be a good product. And so she designed a system, an automated system that could be used to produce them. And to do that, she studied the bag making machine where she was working so she could figure out how that machine could be altered to accomplish the task of making square bottom paper bags. And she eventually put together a wooden model that she could use, and she tested her plan. In fact, she had a shop out here on High Street in Boston where she created her inventions. So she took her wooden model, which was, I think, what you would today call a design concept. She saw that it worked, but in those days, she knew that in order to apply for a patent, she had to create a working model of the machine. Remember, we talked about how in the old days, when you obtained a patent, you actually had to deliver a working model of the device to the United States Patent and Trademark Office. And in 1868, when she invented this bag making machine, that was the case. And so she went down to a shop in Boston and asked them to create a machine shop, the bag making machine that she had sketched out and had created a working concept of. And by the way, this is exactly what you will probably be doing as inventors yourself, because it's one thing to create the physical manifestation on a drawing or on a computer-aided design, but it's another thing to come up with a working model or a prototype. And many of you, when you want to reduce your intellectual property to a tangible form, are going to have to hire designers, illustrators. You'll probably have to go to a machine shop, some of you, in order to have them create what you have envisioned. And that's why I say Margaret Knight is an analog for really what a lot of you are going to need to know when you go out there in the real world. So when she completed the documentation of the work, she showed the drawings and the early models of her invention to the people at this machine shop. And one of them, a fellow by the name of Charles Anand, thought that this was a really terrific idea. And he took the plans that she created and filed a patent application of his own. And he was awarded the patent. Unfortunately, word got back to Margaret Knight, and she sued Charles Anand. And because she had the complete documentation of the work, she was able to show her early drawings of the invention and even entries in diaries that she maintained that proved that she had worked on the machine long before Charles Anand had claimed that he had invented it. And in the lawsuit that resulted back then, we weren't a first to file country, we were a first to invent country. So under the rules of patent law that existed at the time, the person who invented the device first was the one who was awarded the patent. By the way, we at that time and until very recently, we were out of step with the rest of the world who are first to file countries. So the rule is throughout most of the world now is whoever wins the race to the patent house with the idea wins the patent in most cases. Back before 2015, so quite recently, the inventor who came up with the idea would be awarded. And when we had lawsuits involving infringement, the inventors often had to bring in their diaries and their diagrams and their computer files. And they used to have to demonstrate how they had actually reduced their creation to tangible form prior to the date of the claimed invention. And by showing that they were first to invent, were awarded the patent. That's completely changed now, and it's whoever runs up to the steps of the courthouse, the patent house that files their patent first is the one that owns the patent. So if Margaret Knight were alive today, she would have lost that lawsuit because Charles Anand was the first to file. Again, an illustration of why it's necessary to have non-disclosure agreements with your designers and your manufacturers and your prototype producers and with your employees so that you can protect your intellectual property rights. Well, thankfully, Margaret Knight prevailed in that case. If I can figure out a way to share this, I'll show you a picture of her her device. Is anybody seeing that now?
No, you gotta hit share. Okay, now I see it.
I don't know, how am I doing?
We see it.
So this is the actual prototype of the paper bag making machine that was patented first by Charles Anand, but which was wrestled away from Charles Anand and awarded to Margaret Knight. It is the machine which designed the bag, which looks exactly like this. And I got to tell you, I had a lot of trouble finding this ubiquitous kind of Rosetta Stone of a paper bag because as anyone who's been out to the store recently knows, there are a million types of paper bags out there, and there are just as many different forms of intellectual property represented by them. So while someone can own a patent on a bag like this, if you make changes to the bag like this, like Apple has done, you're entitled to you're actually entitled to a different patent. And the reason why is there's a long way from this to this. And in order to qualify for to protect your intellectual property rights, all you have to do is show that you've created some distance between you and the prior art. So while Margaret Knight may have invented this, the designer that came up with this came up with an invention that was in many ways light years ahead of or more advanced than the original. And since there was an advance in the prior art, the intellectual property represented by it was patentable. Remember what we talked about, unless there is originality, unless there is something that distinguishes it from prior art, that's not obvious, it's not patentable. You have to show that you've advanced the art in some way. And by art, I mean prior iterations of the invention. So anyhow, Margaret Knight went out and set up a business with a partner where she manufactured bags herself. And eventually, I think as I mentioned, you can read on the bottom of this bag that it's manufactured by the Eastern Bag Company, which was actually formed by Margaret Knight in 1870. She passed away in 1914, but the Eastern Bag Company continues to make paper bags, and they're one of the largest manufacturers of paper bags in the world. I think they're located in Meridian, Connecticut, but you can correct me if I'm wrong. Anyhow, what did Margaret do with all of this money that she was making on paper bags? Well, she made a number of improvements in the paper bag making machine, which she patented, but she went on to make a lot of other useful products. She moved to Framingham, Massachusetts, but she kept her space on High Street, where she worked on things like toys and manufacturing processes, machines for manufacturing processes like the paper bag machine. She worked on tools and dies. She was really an inventive genius, and she had no formal education. One of the things that she invented was a machine for boring holes. Another was for numbering items. Another one was for making window panes and sashes. She invented a machine for making shoes. And the reason I mentioned that is because her sole making machine was actually, I think, used by my grandmother, who came to this country from Eastern Europe and worked in the shoe factories in Brockton in the early 1920s. And I am certain that one of Margaret Knight's sole presses, and it was a machine that actually cut the soles out of leather so that they could be stitched onto the uppers that made shoes, that my grandmother used to use to when she was working in those factories stitching together shoes. She really is an inventor of a lot of useful things that you and I will have in common and are in contact with every day. Let me, in fact, let me show you. I don't know if you can see this yet, but here's the actual drawing from the United States Patent Office of Margaret Knight's bag feeding machine. Here's an improvement to the paper bag making machine that I showed you earlier. Again, these are the drawings from the United States Patent Office, and they're from a patent awarded to Margaret Knight. Here's the sole cutting machine that I told you about that was created by Margaret Knight, and that my grandmother probably used when she was working in I don't know if you're not old enough to know, but Brockton and a lot of the towns around here, Lowell, Springfield, had these enormous factories where immigrants went to work for pennies per hour or were paid by the piece, stitching everything from shoes to raincoats, just about any sort of wearable item that you can think of was made in Massachusetts in one time by immigrants that came to this country, worked for practically nothing, and used inventions like these made by Margaret Knight. Here's, Robert, one of the things I was saying to you today is that there'd be an invention that might remind you of some of the things that you have around you. This was the first automatic tool for boring and planing concave or cylindroidal surfaces. Again, this was designed and built and patented by Margaret Knight right out here on High Street. Just an amazing, prolific inventor. Here's her invention for the fishing reel. Anybody ever been fishing? Well, Margaret Knight was the one that invented the fishing reel, and it was patented by her in 1902. She even invented the rotary engine. When cars came along in 1902, she became fascinated by them, and she actually used to bring parts of the cars back to her shop on High Street and take them apart and try to figure out how they worked. She brought one of the early internal combustion engines back to her shop, and she decided that it would probably be improved in rotary form. And so you've all heard of the Mazda rotary engine. Well, the Mazda rotary engine was based upon a patent created and awarded to Margaret Knight in 1903. And there it is right there. That's the Mazda rotary engine, or at least insofar as this paper bag here represents the great-great-great-grandfather of this paper bag here. This rotary engine is the great-great-great descendant or ancestor of the modern rotary engine. And who do we owe it to? We owe it to Margaret Knight. Truly an amazing woman. And actually that brought me to another subject. When I was looking around for an example to show you today of this sort of Rosetta Stone of paper bags, it was actually really hard to find. And I found it at a store or at a shop located around the corner from my office, ironically on High Street, all right? The same street that Margaret Knight had her shop. For all I know, it could have been in the same building. But on High Street, there is a shop that sells great sandwiches, by the way. Everybody here in this office usually gets takeout from them. And so I went over to get a look at all of their paper bags, because I remember seeing one that was very much like this Rosetta Stone paper bag there. And I came up with this at the shop this morning. When I went over to get this paper bag, I happened to notice that they had lots of other examples of paper bags, including bags of chips. And I don't know about you, but I started wondering who made, who invented, who patented the original potato chip bag. Now, I have to tell you, it's not the first time I thought about it. I think the second time I thought about it was when I was buying $14 worth of these potato chips at the store on High Street. The first time I actually thought about a bag of potato chips seriously when I was walking on a beach in the Cayman Islands in the Caribbean. And there was all this junk washing up on shore of the beach. It drove me crazy. I had nothing to do. So I used to actually just pick up the trash on the beach and got rid of it. I just couldn't, for the life of me, understand how this beautiful, beautiful beach could be allowed to be bespoiled by all of this debris washing up on the beach. And by the way, you know what the number one piece of ocean trash that I found in my informal way of collecting about 1,500 pounds of trash while I was there, and it's the flip-flop sandal. I don't know why, but there are more flip-flop sandals flying around in the ocean than anything else. But one of the things I found washed up on the beach was this, a bag of Lay's potato chips. And it was all, it was all sun bleached and almost no color to it. You could barely read the label, but it was still sealed, I noticed. And I looked around on the back and I found out that this bag of potato chips that had washed up on the beach was actually 6 years past its expiration date, which means it had to be manufactured and sold more than 6 years before I came walking along on the beach and found it laying there in a bunch of flip-flop sandals and discarded beer cans and things like that. Oh, and lots of plastic containers. So I looked at the thing and I opened it up and I ate one of the chips and it tasted like it had just been made the day before. And I turned around on the bag and I looked at the code on the bag and it showed that it had been manufactured no less than 6 years before I found it on that beach. And I started wondering, well, what's in a potato chip bag? And you'd be amazed to know what's in a potato chip bag. Does anybody know who invented the potato chip bag? Anybody ever thought about it? Well, the potato chip bag was invented by another famous woman, Laura Scudder, who in the 1920s met a salesman by the name of Herman Lay, who was going around selling potato chips out of the back of his car. And she owned a small kitchen out in Springfield, Massachusetts, and she got the idea, well, it would be great to sell these potato chips in a plastic bag. And so she got together with Herman Lay. She created the paper potato chip bag. And as they say, the rest is history. But it was Herman Lay and Laura Scudder who invented the potato chip bag. She went on actually to patent something called a heat sealable oriented plastic film comprising an oriented polypropylene film having on at least one surface a heat sealed layer. Let me share this with you, because this is the patent to the ubiquitous Lay's potato chip bag. And as I began to read it, this is from the abstract. So of course, every patent has to have a description of the invention, and they tend to run a little dry. And here's the patent for the potato chip bag: a heat sealed oriented plastic film comprising an oriented polypropylene film having on at least one surface a heat sealable layer comprising predominantly linear random copolymers of ethylene and up to 12 mole% of at least one further alpha olefin having at least 3 carbon atoms per molecule. Now that's exciting reading. But it's a great illustration of how the abstracts in patents really need to be written in a way that describes in simple descriptive terms what it is that you're claiming a right to own. If you don't describe it accurately, somebody maybe owning a company called Cape Cod will come along and patent it right out from underneath you. So it's important when you describe your invention to describe it in such a way as it adequately includes all of the elements of your invention. Or somebody will come along who has a slightly better or different take on your idea and come up with another patent that might be better and it might be more commercially exploitable. So that's why abstracts and the descriptions and the claims that we make in patent applications are terribly, terribly important. Anyhow, speaking of patented technologies and the potato chip bag, when one stops to consider how many patents are in an Apple paper bag, it pales by comparison to the number of patents represented in a not so humble polypropylene paper bag. And I came up with some of the latest patents filed by Frito-Lay. Again, this is Herman Lay's company from 1920, but these are the latest patents issued to that company by the United States Patent Office, probably invented by people exactly like you, hired to work for the Frito-Lay company, who have contracts that say that anything that you come up with in the course of your employment belongs to Frito-Lay. I can tell you that Herman Lay isn't around to invent these things anymore, so it has to be somebody working for them. And here are some examples. A method and apparatus for closing the bottoms and flaps of a carton, the process for preparing a snack product, the method and apparatus for automatically detecting the presence of holes in filled and sealed packed plastic bags, which is exactly what mine didn't have on that beach in the Cayman Islands. But they actually have a device now that fits on the potato chip bagging machine assembly line, which detects holes in the bag, in the seal of the bag. Of course, these bags are filled with nitrogen now, which is injected by another patented device on the assembly line and then sealed. But of course, you want to find out if there's a leak in the bag, because that affects the freshness and salability of your product. So you buy an invention from someone like you that detects these holes and you put it on your assembly line. Other inventions that they've that they've either purchased or come up with on their own is the method and apparatus for making improved seals between the polymetric levels of film on this bag. You'll notice that this bag has 1, 2, 3 seals. But if you look at the Cape Cod potato chip bag, it has 5 different levels of sealing. I guarantee you there's a patent out there somewhere that distinguishes 3 seals from 5 seals. And they've invented production machines for cookie products and everything else practically that you can name. Again, just some examples of the number of examples of intellectual property that goes into a simple thing like a paper or polyethylene potato chip bag. By the way, anybody know who invented the potato chip? I know, and I only include this because it's true. George Crumb. I can't make this stuff up. Maybe you know the story. George Crumb. And by the way, he may or may not be the inventor of the potato chip. He's generally credited, along with 5 other people, for inventing the potato chip in the United States. But he has such a great name that I like to believe that George Crumb was the inventor of the potato chip. But he was an American Indian, a descendant of an American Indian and a black slave that was working in the kitchen of a restaurant in Saratoga, New York. And George Vanderbilt came in, according to the story, to the restaurant and complained about the potatoes not being crisp enough. When the waiter communicated Mr. Vanderbilt's complaint to Mr. Crumb, the chef, he is reputed to have said, well, I'll show him. And he started cutting potato chips exceedingly thin and frying them up. And he had them served to Mr. Vanderbilt, who, rather than understand the insult that he was receiving, loved the chips. And of course, the rest, as they say, is history. But that at least is a good fable about how the potato chip was invented. I can't honestly sit here in front of you and say that it's true, but it's like one of those things. I hope it's true. I wish it were true. All right. Any questions on the great Margaret Knight potato chip bags, the intellectual property that goes into them, or anything like that up until this point? I hope at least that when you leave class today, you don't look at the paper bag or the potato chip in quite the same way. But the next thing I want to talk about has to do with infringement. Can anybody hazard a guess as to what I mean by infringement? That's okay, I'll wait. Remember, I told you that my philosophy of education is the accidental byproduct of discussion fueled by curiosity. So I'll wait for someone to remember that and tell me what they think infringement means.
I would think if it's somebody creates a patent that's too close to the patent that you've already
I see mouths
submitted.
moving, but you might be muted.
Can anyone else hear me?
Yeah.
Well, in any case, infringement is the use of someone else's idea or protected technology. You've heard of patent infringement. Of course, in the case of Margaret Knight and her bag making machine, that was a case of infringement where Charles Annan actually stole her technology. That's a case of patent infringement. When you copy and paste something and put it up on the internet, That's most likely an example of copyright infringement. If you were to, for instance, use the golden arches to as a design feature of your new hamburger restaurant, that would probably constitute trademark infringement. Can anybody give me some other examples of infringement? Sheng, how about you? You're the design guy.
You mean non-infringement?
Anything? Can you think of a design, an infringing design? What country are you from, Sheng?
I'm from Taiwan.
Have you ever heard of Louis Vuitton?
Yes.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but in Qingdao, there's a place where you can go in the old city, which is, it reminds me of the old Filene's basement, but it's where all of the runs go from the manufacturers that make Louis Vuitton, what's that famous raincoat manufacturer on Burberry, Lacoste, all the famous manufacturers. Of course, all of their products are made in China, right? And they're made in factories. Now, when Burberry orders 50,000 famous raincoats based upon their designs from a factory in Qingdao, of course, the factory, they have their run. They don't make exactly 50,000. Maybe they make 50,001 or 51,000. So they send 50,000 to Burberry in London. Well, do you know what happens with the other 1,000? No. Well, I'll tell you. They go to this place in Qingdao, in the old city. I can show you pictures of it. It's this huge, huge department store. And you can walk in there and buy, I've never bought a Burberry raincoat, but I'm told that some of them are very expensive and they cost $4,000, $5,000, $6,000. You can buy them for $200 in this place. And they have stacks and stacks. When Levi Jeans orders 1 million pair of jeans, do you think they stop the production run at 1 million? No, they don't. They usually make 1,100,000. And you know where the other 100,000 go? They go to Qingdao in this place, and you buy them for $2, $3, $4 a piece. A little bit of advice: if you travel to China, make it a point to go to Qingdao and you buy the original items that are being sold at Harrods, on Newbury Street, on the Champs-Élysées for pennies on the dollar, because they are the exact item, but they are what's left over from the run at the factory that the customer didn't order. But something has to be done with them, and they're sold in Qingdao at that. I wish I can show you pictures of me standing in front of the store with a look of shock and disbelief because of what I couldn't believe I was seeing. But also China is known for knocking off products like Louis Vuitton or Hermes, which, by the way, they didn't invent. Massachusetts was the inventor of ripping off patented technology. I don't know if you know that, but the first patent issued by the General Court in Massachusetts, which is now known as the Massachusetts Legislature, was issued to a fellow who had stolen a design from England for producing cotton. Most likely one of the mills that Margaret Knight worked on at the age of 12 in Springfield, Massachusetts. That technology was all stolen from England, brought to the United States. And here in this country, the legislature used to pay bounties for stolen patented technology. And so the first patent issued in Massachusetts was issued on stolen technology. So whenever I lecture on this subject, especially when I lecture in China on this subject, I make it a point because, of course, this is an important political issue nowadays. Everybody, criticizes China for not respecting intellectual property rights. But the fact is, it's a little bit of the, in this case, of the pot calling the kettle black. Back in the 1790s, Massachusetts invented stealing patented technology. But anyhow, nowadays we have very strict rules in force that need to be followed. And when you rip off a Louis Vuitton design or a Burberry design and call it your own, or you sell it as a genuine item, you're engaging in the infringement of those design and utility patents, those trademarks, and the copyrighted technology. Anyhow, it's 9:50. I'm going to use that as a jumping off spot for our next lecture. I'm going to spend the entire next lecture focusing on infringement, especially as it relates to your lives as students. I'm sure that by that time you will have all visited the MIT website and looked at the student handbook when it comes to infringement and plagiarism, and be experts on it so that we can discuss it next term. Because copyright infringement really does affect each and every one of you in ways beyond the grade that you may get for a course. You may recall that I was mentioning in the last lecture that you had that simply giving someone credit for having a copyright on an item does not absolve you of infringement, either civil or criminal infringement. And so I'm going to talk about the ins and outs of infringement, the loopholes, the rules that you need to be conscious of, whether you're a student or you're writing a research paper or you're out there inventing something of your own, the rules that you need to be aware of, not only when it comes to respecting other people's inventions and patented technology, but also protecting your own technology from being infringed by others. Okay, so if you don't have any other questions, that's it for me today. Any questions? It was nice having you in my office. I promise not to wear a bow tie again unless it's absolutely necessary. And I apologize for the wall of shameless self-congratulation behind me. Like I said, don't be impressed by it or fooled by it. Okay, everybody? See you next Wednesday. Cheers.